afternoon. I am so excited to be here and really honored that there's so many people interested in innovation, because I know that we are for sure. My name is Sandy Carter. I'm the Vice President for Enterprise Workloads at Amazon Web Services. And I will be joined here shortly on stage with two other amazing innovators, Bridget Frey, who is the CTO of Redfin, as well as Tamara McCleary, who is the CEO of Ethereum. And you're going to love meeting them because they both have done incredible things. Now, you also see up here our Twitter hashtags, so you can tweet away because we'd love to hear your questions. We're not sure at the end we're going to be able to take a lot of questions because we're going to do presentation style for the first little bit of the session, and then we're going to switch over to Q&A. Okay? You guys ready? Yeah. Okay, here we go. So if you think about innovation, it is one of the top 3 themes that we're hearing about here at South by, but it's also a huge, 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 huge theme around the world. 93% of executives said that in order for them to grow, they've got to innovate, and they've got to innovate in a really big way. However, 81% of those same executives said that their organizations, they didn't believe their organizations could innovate. Now, I know that every single one of you here is an innovator. So what I want to do today is to share with you some mechanisms that we've developed that can help you innovate. And you can take this back to your businesses, to your bosses, to your boards, and really innovate in order to grow. Now, when we're talking about innovation, a lot of people talk about product innovation, right? You hear product innovation a lot. Want to go from 1.0 to 2.0, but we found that companies that innovate the fastest and have the biggest innovations actually innovate on 4 dimensions. Of course, they innovate on product. Product is pretty obvious, but they also innovate on operational excellence. And that means that they're looking for things like robots to help them. They're looking for things like cloud to make them more efficient and effective. We also see those same companies innovating on the client experience, which many say is one of the last forms of true competitive differentiation. So they're using things like artificial intelligence and IoT to really drive that client experience. And we're also seeing business model innovation. So think about Airbnb, right? They disrupted a whole industry by changing a business model. So as you're innovating, look at all 4 of these areas, not just one, not just the product, but all 4 of these areas. Now, as we did our research, we looked at, where is the most innovation found? And as you would probably guess, most of the 5,000 companies and people we talked to said that the biggest innovation was done in Silicon Valley. And so we looked for what kind of things does Silicon Valley do that other places don't. And this was a big aha. We found that 90% of the companies in Silicon Valley create an innovation strategy. And they link that to their business planning as they go forward. As we looked at the rest of the world, only 20% of the companies actually create an innovation strategy, and only 5% of them link it to their business strategy. How many of you guys in the room have an innovation strategy? Okay, so this is a big takeaway, I think, is create that innovation strategy. Now, this is called superpowers, superpowers of innovation that we all have inside of us. And so I wanted to share those 3 superpowers and how we'll go through those today. So the first one is around super intelligence. And this is about how do you get intelligence about your customer. It's about customer obsession, not customer focus, but customer obsession. We're talking about super speed. How can you get there quicker to a certain goal? And here we're talking about what you need. You have to have an agile team in order to do that. Your team and your culture makes a huge difference. And we're going to talk about super synergy, how everybody today is built with ecosystems. They're not alone. And how do you build that ecosystem? Now, you'll also notice that underpinning all of this is technology. So we're here at South by Southwest, big tech hub. It's really interesting how these innovative companies are using technology in order to innovate, whether it's artificial intelligence or virtual reality or IoT. So we'll show you some of that as well. So I'm going to cover super intelligence. Bridget will come up and cover super speed, and then we're going to be closed out with Tamara covering super synergy as we go along. So let me take you through super intelligence. Now, super intelligence is really about understanding your customer. No, really understanding your customer. Not just building something because you can make it and then sharing it with your customer and having the customer say yes or no to that. It's really about obsessing about your customer, really understanding what they need and what they can leverage in order to make them more successful. So it's not about you, it's about them. Now, customer obsession for us is about empathy. And empathy has been another word I've heard a lot here at South by Southwest. Empathy is being able to feel what your customer feels. And if you think about it, that's really what innovation is all about. It's about being able to understand your customer, not assume you understand your customer, but understand your customer at that level of depth. So if you think about it, all great products and services, think about any that you know today, come from your company, you, really deeply understanding what they need, what they want, and who they are. So let's take an example. This is Just Eat. It's a company out of the UK. They actually are in 15 different countries around the world, and they do online food delivery from 62,000 different restaurants. How do they listen to the customer? How do they become customer obsessed? Well, of course they do research, but they also do hackathons with their customers. They do projects online and social media to really understand what they're looking for. They look at teens all the way up, and they're making sure that they're listening and obsessing on those customers. One of their latest things that they've just done with their customers is they've released ordering food from Alexa. So you can say, Alexa, order a pizza, or Alexa, how long will it take for that sushi to be delivered? All that was delivered and thought of by customers. They now leverage artificial intelligence in that, so they can remember what food you like to eat on Friday night. It was pizza. Monday night was sushi. So they're leveraging that knowledge to better help and better serve you, all driven by their obsession for the client. So when we talk about the customer, we're talking about working backwards from the customer. So we're not talking about starting from the company or your product set. We're talking about starting with your customer and then working backwards from the customer. So a lot of people will say, how do you do that? Well, one of the really hot things that's happening today in Silicon Valley are things called empathy labs. Now, we talked about empathy being at the heart and soul of innovation. So what is an empathy lab? Well, it really simulates how a customer might feel. So in healthcare, I've experienced empathy labs that simulate, using virtual reality, how you might feel if you had Alzheimer's, or a mobility challenge, or a cataract. I've experienced empathy labs for retailers, so they could actually go in and truly experience the customer experience as they go through and analyze several different ways that they could do that. So empathy labs are one way to truly understand and truly obsess over that customer. Now I want to share with you a mechanism that you might use in order to innovate at that great pace and really obsess over your client. This particular mechanism comes from Amazon. So what Amazon does is, before they innovate a new idea, they first write a press release. Anybody can write a press release, and it's announcing a new product. Typically, we look a couple of years out, like what's going to happen in 2020. We ensure that our press release has customer quotes in it, so that you can really leverage and see what's going to happen when their customer is delighted with that new offering or that new service. And we're looking for this, again, a couple years out. So for instance, here at South by Southwest, we had a mayor's conference, and we asked the mayors to envision what a city would look like in 2020. what would that headline be? Who would your quotes be from? Would they be from citizens, teenagers, businesses? What would that look like in order to bring that mechanism home? And then what we do is we write a frequently asked question set. So this could be, what are you announcing? Who are your customers? What will your customers love about it? What will they say you need to improve upon? And then finally, we write this working backwards document. 6 pages long, it's a narrative, and it really goes into detail about the solution. In fact, we answer a set of questions in that narrative. And those questions are these 5 questions. First, who is the customer? And we want to know in detail, what's the time frame? Is it aspirational? What's the context? We're looking for the customer problem, not the solution, but what is the true need that the customer has? We're looking for the most important customer benefit. So again, some tips here is think about the big idea, think big, and figure out what's the one most crucial competitive advantage that your customer will get from this. And then always ask the question, how do you know this is what your customer needs? Did you go to an empathy lab? Did you talk to 1,000 customers? Did they experience the beta? And always look for what your customers need from their perspective. So for instance, I might know about Prime and Prime Air, and that might bias my viewpoint. So you want to know how the team got these answers. And then finally, what does the customer experience look like? As much as possible, draw that out so that they can experience that as well. These questions are really important for us as we get a team that builds it. Now, I don't know, how many of you guys have heard of the 2 pizza teams? So we believe that a 2 pizza team is ideally the right size for innovation to spring up. Why do we believe that? Well, that allows you to decompose your problem to something that's manageable. It enables self-direction with true ownership and true autonomy. So you can make decisions, you can move quickly, you can move fast, and you can really have an impact on what you're trying to accomplish. So we revise, we make the idea better through iteration. So what I want to show you next is a little video of Amazon Go, and then I want to talk to you about all the iterations that we did from that particular project. So if we could play this video, please.
Four years ago, we started to wonder, what would shopping look like if you could walk into a store, grab what you want, and just go? What if we could weave the most advanced machine learning, computer vision, and AI into the very fabric of a store so you never have to wait in line? No lines, no checkouts, no registers. Welcome to Amazon Go. Use the Amazon Go app to enter. Then put away your phone and start shopping. It's really that simple. Take whatever you like. Anything you pick up is automatically added to your virtual cart. If you change your mind about that cupcake, just put it back. Our technology will update your virtual cart automatically. So, how does it work? We used computer vision, deep learning algorithms, and sensor fusion, much like you'd find in self-driving cars. We call it Just Walk Out technology. Once you've got everything you want, you can just go. When you leave, our Just Walk Out technology adds up your virtual cart and charges your Amazon account. Your receipt is sent straight to the app, and you can keep going. Amazon Go.
So Amazon Go was an initial concept, and what we did first is we tried it as a beta store, and we had our employees come in and test it out. Then, as customers came up to Seattle, we brought them in so they could try different things. We finally just opened the store in Seattle live, so anybody can go in it. If you go to Seattle, you must go and see it. So you can go into the store and experience it, but it's just in Seattle now, and then we'll expand it out. So the really interesting thing is this is working backwards from the customer. It's using technology to create that customer experience that they want, that they have aspired to, and it really does help us to obsess about our customers. So we push ourselves to invent on behalf of the customer as we're moving forward. Now, we're not the only ones who do this. This is a startup. This is called 360 Fashion. I took a picture of the ring. I don't know if you guys can see it on my finger as well. So the founder of 360 Fashion is a model, so she likes to make beautiful things. But she also wanted to obsess about her customers, which are mostly women, and she found that a lot of women are attacked. So she wanted to create a safety ring. So she obsessed, and she really determined, how are most women attacked? They're mostly attacked from behind. So she created this ring, which has IoT sensors in it. If you hold it down, let's say I was attacked from the back and I hold it down, it will contact the police for me so I can get rescued. It's also pretty, so people will actually wear it. Coming from obsession of your customers, her dress is made with washable LED fabric, and as she moves, the IoT sensors in the dress will also move with her. Again, knowing and obsessing about her customers. It can't just be LED fabric, it's got to be washable LED fabric. So what we're looking for here is to determine how are you going to grow and what is your innovation around. For Amazon, we go after 3 things all at the same time. We look at value, selection, and convenience. And we believe that if we can deliver innovation on those 3 vectors at all times, this will create a loop of value for our customers and will cause our customers to come back to us because we create that value for them. So in summary, if you look at the way that you would do digital innovation by obsessing over your customer, you create a design challenge. What could happen in 2020? You create an empathy map so that you're really empathizing with their customer and their journey. You frame up the problem, and then you create that strong point of view so that you can use and apply that super intelligence to the problem. So our second superpower is around super speed. It really complements that intelligence. Now, speed is not about just going fast to go fast. Speed is about reaching a goal at an accelerated rate of pace. And if you think about those companies who innovate, they have high velocity decision making. That's what they strive for. But they don't do it consistently. They do it when it's required. A lot of companies will do a 2-door and a 1-door phenomenon. So what does that mean? Well, if you've got a 2-door decision, that means that you can go into the door and you can come back out. You can experiment with something, have people try it out. That's a 2-way door, and that means that you should move really fast because you can try things out and experiment. But if you have a really big decision that's a 1-way door, you're going to walk into it, and when you come back out, you may not be able to get back out. Then you take your time, and you're very methodical, and you dive deep on making those decisions. I want to bring up on stage with me Bridget Frey now from Redfin to talk about how her team makes high-velocity decisions. Please welcome to the stage Bridget Frey, CTO of Redfin.
Redfin's mission since day one has been to redefine real estate in the consumer's favor. Back then, we knew it was a massive market with more than $75 billion in fees at stake every year. And we knew that it was an industry that technology could change for the better, the type of industry that could really benefit from all those innovation superpowers. But what we had no clue about is which of our ideas were going to be good ideas, true innovations that really changed the lives of our customers. And so from the outside looking in, Redfin just kind of seemed like this strange idea that people would just sort of scratch their heads at. And before I joined Redfin, I might have shared that opinion. But the thing is, I really care about real estate because when I was a kid, I moved a lot. I lived in 7 different houses in 5 different states growing up. And every time we moved, I saw what my parents had to go through, how scary it was. You had to go through a real estate agent for absolutely everything. And so when I heard this idea that you could use technology to make real estate better, it really spoke to me. Sometimes you'll hear people say that all the good problems are taken, that people are already innovating on all the things worth working on. But there are still so many things that need innovation. There are big problems in our society, like how to get people access to healthcare, or what to do about gun control. Or just think about, what all those little things that drive you up the wall in your everyday life. The issue with innovation, it's not that there's no problems to work on, it's figuring out which ones you really care about. And so Redfin's first big innovation was to put houses for sale on a map. We were the first company to do this. But then we had to go back and figure out a business model that would go along with this cool idea. And so at first people told us, you gotta run ads for traditional agents. But no, we had this vision that we were gonna build the real estate brokerage of the future. And we thought, all right, we're software engineers, we've got this, we're gonna automate everything. So we put up a button that said, click here to buy a house. And we thought you could just totally get rid of the real estate agent. I mean, who needs that? But the thing was, this idea was a failure. Our customers did not like what we were building, and that's because those same people that liked looking at homes on our website, well, they still needed someone to walk through a home with them. They needed someone to tell them whether the roof ought to be replaced, how to negotiate on a home. And so we had to set that idea aside and move on to the next one. We would have been so much better off if we had realized that that version of Redfin was just a first draft. So this is an illustration from one of my favorite graphic novelists, Kazuki Bui Sheet. And his illustrations, they're haunting and they're complex and beautiful, but they don't start out this way. In his creative process, he actually forces himself to use the least expensive notepaper for all those early drafts. And that's to remind himself that those early drafts, they're disposable. I think it's a reminder for innovators that we can get too precious in our ideas. We sort of pick this one idea and then we iterate on it and try to make it perfect. But sometimes it's time to just turn to the next page. The thing is, innovation, it often doesn't feel like going from one brilliant, bold idea to the next. It often feels like waste. It feels like you picked this idea and you poured your soul into it, but then you have to set it aside and move on to the next one. And so as it turned out, the really weird innovation that Redfin came up with was to invest in both tech and service to fix real estate. And the thing is, we nearly didn't do this. And the reason that we almost didn't do it, it wasn't business driven, it was aesthetic. It was because we thought of ourselves as software developers, and we thought of software as kind of cool, and we thought of being a real estate agent as kind of old school. And so we might not have ever attempted to put these things together. But once we realized that it was counterproductive to not think about investing in tech and service, we poured ourselves into building a culture where software developers and real estate agents could work together side by side. And so it started out with some little things, like our engineers wearing We Love Agents t-shirts. And then we made our real estate agents employees so they could be a full part of our mission. Today, this is really ingrained in our culture. So I had an engineer say to me that when we ship a bug in our agent software, he feels like he's letting down a friend. And this has led to some really remarkable innovations, this partnership between real estate agents and engineers. A couple of years ago, we asked ourselves, what would it be like if you could schedule a home tour with the click of a button? And at first, this might seem like a pretty tractable problem. I mean, you've probably booked a restaurant using something that looks a lot like this. But this problem turned out to be way, way harder than we were first expecting. You see, to schedule a home tour, well, first you've got to make sure you have a real estate agent available when the customer wants to go see the house. But then often there's someone who's living in that house. And so you've got to call their listing agent and find out, can they clear out on a Sunday at 2 p.m. when your customer wants to go see it? And then your customer, often they don't want to see just one home. They want to see a lot of different homes. So now you've got to optimize drive times in the future, whatever traffic's going to be like, trying to get them to all these places that they need to be. And this problem, it was so hard that we kept talking ourselves out of working on it. We said, oh, it's too hard. It'll never work. We just shouldn't even bother. But the thing was, this was a good idea. And good ideas are rare. When you come up with a good idea, you need to drop everything and find a way to work on it. And so today, this idea has really transformed our business. One of the next things we ran into as the company was growing was, how can we scale innovation? We had this situation where it felt like a lot of our best ideas, they were coming from just a handful of people, mainly executives who'd been with the company for a long time. And I think we had inadvertently set up this model of innovation that it's maybe how you think it works for Steve Jobs or Elon Musk. You have this visionary leader, and ideas just kind of flow down from there. But we wanted to try this other model. So we wanted to empower teams to innovate. And so we said to all the teams, all right, you own your strategy, you own your own destiny now. So just work on your innovative ideas, and once a quarter, you can come in and present them. And we're like, boom, we've scaled innovation, no problem. So yeah, so we had some people, so one of the teams came in for one of these early meetings, and they'd worked really hard on this idea for reimagining how to search for homes on the map. And so they come in, they're all excited, and then this executive, he kind of leans forward and he asked a single question, and it was about a metric that this feature would affect. And the whole idea just fell apart. I mean, you could see everyone's faces fall and their shoulders slump. See, the thing with innovation is that first you have to almost turn off your brain, turn off your critical thinking, get into this mode where you can dream big and ignore all the risks and how hard it's going to be. But then you've got to go right back, turn on your critical thinking, dig into the numbers, and find out whether your idea really has legs. And that was the part that we weren't getting right. One of the reasons that it had been so hard for them to dig into the data is that it was really hard to get to the data. We hadn't invested in that. We have this really transparent culture at Redfin. We aspire to share information widely, but we hadn't built an easy-to-use database. We hadn't built business intelligence reporting so people could get a snapshot of what was going on. Our machine learning efforts, they were nascent at best. And we had this one poor engineer who was the only one who knew how to run queries on our analytical database. And he was just overwhelmed. Like, people would line up asking all of these questions, and it just wasn't working. So that's actually the problem that I joined Redfin to solve, to found our analytics engineering team to try to take data to the next level and let machine learning power innovations. And this has led to so many important changes for the company. So we now use machine learning to power things like recommending homes to our customers or predicting when homes are likely to sell fast. We even built this feature that I love where we try to optimize an agent's day. We say, if you've got 5 minutes in between home tours, what's a really valuable thing that that agent could do with that time? What customers should they reach out to? What's a meaningful insight that we could give to that customer so that it's not just spam? But the thing was, it wasn't enough to just build a machine learning architecture. We had to go through a lot of learning to figure out how to make use of it. So this is one of the features that we've built that's based on machine learning. It's the Redfin Estimate. And this is our technology for predicting the price at which a home will sell. And it's the most accurate online home value estimate. So this is something that's been a significant amount of engineering work for us. But when we first started working on this, we had this data scientist who was starting to do all the research on this subject, and one of our executives went up to the data scientist, and he's like, all right, here's how it's going to work. I think I've got the idea for this algorithm. So the square footage is going to count twice as much as the bedrooms, and then we'll weight all these other factors this way, and we'll run it through, and we'll see whether it predicts the price. What do you think? And the data scientist just kind of folded his arms, and he goes, do you even know what machine learning is? The thing is, we hadn't made it possible for our innovators to understand how to use machine learning. We hadn't built that bridge. And so we had to do some work to make sure that people knew what kinds of things machine learning could do. There was another reason, though, that we put off working on this for a while, and it's that there were other companies who had already built home value estimates. And so we told ourselves, if we're going to work on this, we want to be better. We want to have something that's different about our approach. And this is something that's interesting about working in a field where machine learning technology, the cloud, it's changing so fast, it's getting better and better every year. So there can almost be an advantage to starting a little bit later when you're moving in a fast-moving tech field like this one. When we actually first started developing this algorithm, we were ready to turn it on full blast in Amazon Web Services. So it's late at night when cloud computing is cheap, and we go to flip the switch, and all the graphs are running green. And then the phone rang, and it was Amazon Web Services. And they're like, could you turn off your algorithm for a little bit? It's actually swamping all of our compute resources in our Oregon data center. So that's something you don't hear about every day, is you can actually run out of cloud. But it hasn't happened in a while. But it just shows you that with this technology, you're able to stay on the edge. You're able to harness power that would have been cost prohibitive just a couple of years ago. And that's one of the reasons that we were able to get such accuracy from this algorithm. But But one of the other reasons it took us a while to develop this is that we actually already had a more accurate way to price homes. We had real estate agents who would walk through a house and they would look at it, and they did a better job at pricing homes than an algorithm could. And so we thought, who are we to add this algorithm that's not going to be as accurate? Won't that get in the way of an agent's relationship with a customer? And so our breakthrough was to really start thinking about how this algorithm could enhance the relationship with the customer. And we took that into account when we were designing it. So the Redfin Estimate, it doesn't just spit out a number. It actually shows, what is that algorithm based on? The algorithm explains itself. It says it's based on these homes, and this is why. And so now when an agent is having a conversation with a customer, it's almost like they're inviting the algorithm into the room to be a part of it. It just goes back to this old truism that when you're designing something, you always need to keep your customer in mind. But another thing I want to talk to you about is cognitive diversity. So cognitive diversity is getting differences in thought from your team. And you can get to that from a lot of different ways, but one of them is just to have people on your team from diverse backgrounds. So they could be different ages, they could be different races. It could mean just not having everyone at your company have graduated from the same college. There's a lot of different ways that you can get different perspectives and different approaches onto the same team. When I joined Redfin, I was actually the only woman on our Seattle engineering team. Today, we have more than 200 people in technology, and 32% of them are women. Thank you. And we've improved in a lot of other types of diversity as well. And along the way, we've had to invest in building a collaborative culture, a culture of respect. And this is exactly the kind of culture that you need to breed innovation, because innovative people need to surround themselves with positive, creative people, people who will amplify your ideas and add your own twist. And this is not a small thing. This is the biggest thing in innovation. Housing and homeownership, they're major issues in our society, especially as you start thinking about things like wealth inequality and neighborhood diversity, mobility, and all the rest. And at Redfin, we're helping people make the right decision about where to live. We're helping them win that dream home. We're taking care of people whose lives are in transition. Our customers, they're not just clicking on a cat video or buying a plastic gadget. They're looking for a better life. And we're working on how people buy and sell homes today, but we're also looking at how people are going to do that 10, 20, 50 years in the future. And if you can set yourself up to work on a big problem, a problem that matters, a problem that's so overwhelming it feels like there's so much to do, that's how you set yourself up to innovate not just once, but over and over. It's how you set yourself up to really take advantage of those innovation superpowers. And now I'd like to welcome Sandy back to the stage.
Great job. Thank you. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Bridget. So you can see the high velocity decision making that comes from a Redfin who's really driving a lot of these decisions very, very quickly. Now we want to go to our third superpower, if we can, which is going to be super synergy. Now, super synergy is really interesting because it's about building an ecosystem around which you work. And these partners, influencers, can come in. Sometimes they'll stay with you for a long time. Sometimes they might come in just to solve a particular problem. I love this example. I use this in the book that I wrote called Extreme Innovation. This is about Elon Musk. I don't know if you guys saw him the other day, but I think this is just a brilliant example. So Laura Clemure, who's a friend of mine, he actually spoke here at the conference. He's an entrepreneur from France, but now living in San Francisco. He has about 3,000 Twitter followers. And he tweeted Elon one day when he got really frustrated with the charging stations from Tesla. What I find incredible is Elon Musk, 2-3 million followers, responded to him in less than 4 hours. Not only did he respond to him, but he said, wow, you're right. I'm going to take action. Now, I think it's incredible, first of all, that a CEO is that customer obsessed, moves with that amount of speed, but will take action. That's really interesting too, because the charging stations aren't all Tesla charging stations. They're in employee parking lots, they're in shopping centers, they're in garages, they're all over. There's a huge ecosystem. And he was able to leverage that ecosystem and make this change in 4 days, which to me is incredible. It shows you that innovation, that culture, that speed, that customer obsession that these kind of great companies have. Now, leveraging an ecosystem is also really important for entrepreneurs as well. And I love this fact. So if you think about female founders, they actually use a third less capital than their male counterparts. When I did this research with Carnegie Mellon, Silicon Valley, I was like, why is that? It's because female founders build strong ecosystems that leverage each other. In fact, female founders, I don't know if you know this, are 15% more profitable than their male counterparts, but 40% less likely to get funded. So I wanted to explore this ecosystem, and who better than one of the top entrepreneurs, just ranked by Entrepreneur Magazine, Tamara McCleary, who is the CEO of Thermia. I wanted her to come up and talk to you about how her company is leveraging this ecosystem magic. So please welcome Tamara McCleary.
Thank you, Sandy. I hope you don't mind I brought your book up here.
Oh, that's okay.
How many of you have extreme innovation? Oh, you gotta get it, right? So the reason I love so much leading in with talking about the power of a strong and healthy ecosystem is you think about South by Southwest and how many people are here. And you know, do you realize that if everyone here actually thought about scaling their business or scaling where you're at, you could do it right here, right now with the people that are here at South by Southwest. Because we can do more together, better together than we can on our own. And that's really the key to a powerful ecosystem, is that you are partnering for the win-win together. To be able to be customer obsessed because you can actually meet the needs of the customer much more readily through a shared ecosystem with all partners. So are you asking yourself why there's steak on the... Are you getting hungry? And if you're vegan, don't take offense to this. It's really, this is to highlight, you know, what we think is so innovative and fresh now. A lot of it has some old school ways to it. So if you think back to earlier days, say like the 1920s, the 30s, the 40s, maybe even in the 50s, you had Joe the butcher on the corner shop. Now, the reason Joe the butcher did so well is that Joe knew his customers. And he knew his customers because back then community was a lot different than it is today. So communities were very tight, there was information shared, and if you showed up to Joe's butcher shop, Joe knew exactly how you liked your steaks, a 1/4 inch thick or more. And so Joe delivered on that. In our today experience, things are a bit more complicated. Things are moving very quickly. In fact, today is the slowest day of your life. That's how fast things are getting. So these ecosystems, and in our company, in Thulium, we're a global digital marketing agency, and we focus on social media in the B2B and enterprise space. And to do that, we're harnessing the power of this human creativity and connection, but powered by artificial intelligence and machine learning. Why? Because we could not possibly, not humanly possibly, do what we do without partnering with our ecosystem of partners and partnering, yes, with machines. So one thing I'd like to say is no matter how great your new tech product or service is, it will fail if people don't buy into it. And how people buy into your product or service is feeling a connection to it. So here's a great strategy for you in your own businesses for building a very powerful, effective ecosystem to drive innovation and business growth. So what you see here are 4 different ways that you can build an ecosystem, and you want to actually get very strategic on how you build your ecosystem so that it is delivering on your business results. So driving is one way that basically it advances the strategy of your current business. So it's not going to increase, but it's driving where you're at right now. And a great example of that, of a driving ecosystem, is the partnership, Microsoft partnering with Facebook to drive the Bing. How many of you love Bing? Ooh, I'm not hearing a resounding yes. So the jury's out, right? So Facebook and Microsoft coming together in a strategic partnership in that ecosystem to really then drive the use of Bing. The emergence, so that's in the top right-hand sections. This is where you're going to get your dollars, your driving, your business growth. This is going to allow exponential growth of potential new business. So a good example of this, and this chart actually is found here in Extreme Innovation. And then just full disclosure, I actually have a contribution inside this book as well. So that's my disclosure to you. But this chart's in the book, and a great example of emergent is Facebook's acquisition of Oculus. So that's not a partnership, right? That was a strategic acquisition because they believe in virtual reality, in that VR to drive business success. Enabling is, you know, those complementary partnerships that you can make in your ecosystem that really support the current business. And then passive, a great example of passive is, say, your resellers, right? So, or, you know, anything that's going to have basically just that financial payoff. So the framework for success that we actually drove recently, and I wanted to share openly with you, is we had a unique problem set in the fact that we were dealing with B2B and enterprise and harnessing social media to do exactly what Sandy was talking about, which was becoming customer obsessed, and then harnessing this ecosystem of partners to be able to drive measurable growth. And we did this at the recent World Economic Forum. Are any of you unfamiliar with the World Economic Forum? So it's held in Davos, Switzerland, and it is the summit of summits. The purpose of the World Economic Forum is to draw leaders from nonprofits, leaders from for-profit, and governments to come together to try to solve the world's greatest problems. Now, we were there to drive the future of work, looking at workforce transformation, what's going to happen to people when they're displaced out of their jobs. And how we drove what we drove at the World Economic Forum was calling upon exactly what I'm speaking about today, and the chart that you just saw, which was harnessing a breadth and a depth of an ecosystem of partners. So we were working with technology partners that were involved in artificial intelligence, machine learning, natural language processing to support business, to drive messaging, to, in the social space, social listening, figuring out what the conversations are happening around the future of work and workplace transformation, and also who's having those conversations, who's driving those conversations. And then through that intelligence with several organizations who have those tools, we then begin to develop a very deep ecosystem of partners that were actually influencers within that space. And those influencers drive a lot through their messaging, their relationships, and all of these came together to really rise this message up about the future of work, workforce transformation, digital transformation, beyond the topic of it and into how. How do companies do this? What are the next steps? What are we going to do about it? And what was really interesting is we harnessed this for one particular client, which is a global consulting firm. They are operational in 170 countries. So we were doing this 24 hours a day throughout Davos, and we were able to elevate their messaging, their position, and their broadest range above all of their competition, who instead had paid for storefronts in Davos, or wrapped buildings. They didn't do any of that. In fact, they only had one person on the ground in Davos. They drove this through this whole ecosystem of partners to 10 times above any of their competition, have their messaging out there to be the thought leader, to be established in the marketplace as driving the conversation with where to go next in workforce transformation in the future of work. What was really interesting is the only company that had more messaging and thought leadership going on at Davos, the World Economic Forum, was Reuters. It's pretty phenomenal because Reuters is not a consulting firm. So Reuters is pumping out news. So it was absolutely phenomenal. So this ecosystem is absolutely powerful when harnessed, when you look at what is the shared alliance between you and, say, other organizations. How can you scale what it is that you're doing by tapping into the power of what other organizations and businesses are already doing well, that you can partner with them so that you can be greater together than you are on your own. And then I think this really affects employee engagement as well, because when you look at an ecosystem and you look at a company, it's not just the customer external, but there are those internal customers as well that are served through a really powerful ecosystem of partners. So how this worked in Davos, Switzerland for the World Economic Forum, we used metrics to look at where this organization was prior to harnessing artificial intelligence through automation, through putting people in places to be able to engage in all their various native tongues, not just in English. So we were looking at all peoples, all time zones, and all languages. And after employing this huge, massive effort through the ecosystem, we were able to really move the needle like has never been done before. So in the end, it really is about the relationship. A lot has changed, but a lot has not. And when I think about the human-machine partnership, what we uniquely bring to the table is we bring our human creativity, our ability to connect, and our desire to connect and build relationships. But to scale it at the speed that we live in today, in today's modern times, we absolutely can partner with machines to be able to drive innovation and drive business growth in a way that is commensurate with the speed at which we are trying to process data and trying to reach a multitude of people. So thank you so much, and I really appreciate you being open to the machine-human partnership. I know it's a huge debate out there, but I encourage you to tap into your ecosystem, take a look at that chart, and plan out, strategize how you can begin to build powerful networks within not only your field, but look outside of your field. It's a broad reach and a deep reach for success. And I'm going to invite Sandy and Bridget, right? Or Sandy?
Yep. Thank you. Okay, so hopefully you've seen some really interesting mechanisms to help you guys as you go back to your businesses to really innovate. And I really want to end with, each of you guys is an innovator. As you're looking at some of the traits that you need to have as you go forward, think about learning, being a lifelong learner. A lot of the innovators that we talk to, continuous and voracious in their learning. They're risk takers. They're not afraid to go out there and experiment and try some things out. They're obsessed by their customers. They are problem solvers, and they build ecosystems. It's part of their ethos to build that ecosystem as they're coming in. And risk-taking, can be scary, right? So I have 2 daughters, and they brought me this picture one day. And we do a Sunday tradition where we make pancakes. And so they said, Mom, can you make me these pancakes? It looks pretty easy, right? So I said, sure, I can experiment, and I can try to make some of those pancakes. I think I can do a really good job. My pancakes were definitely edible, definitely not as pretty. But I experimented with it, and those are the types of things that we're looking for. Amazon has a set of leadership principles, and those leadership principles are things like being able to be curious, learn and be curious. Make sure you're diving deep. Make sure that you're thinking big. These types of things are very motivational, very aspirational, and they're things that drive your business to become a great innovation business. Now, if you think about some of the major things that I wanted you guys to look at, we did develop a little innovation assessment. It's just a way for you guys to see, like, what is my superpower? Am I really about obsessing about the customer? Am I curious? Am I using tech to innovate and to explore, like those empathy labs? Am I focused on speed? Am I able to, have those high velocity decisions, but come through my agile team and the way that I work together? And am I able to build ecosystems? Am I able to make sure that I have partnerships that are helping me to drive new strategic initiatives? So it's a really interesting way to go through, see what your superpower is, and see other people you want to surround yourself with to really be successful in the marketplace. So to close out this part of the session, now at the bottom, and I'm sorry I didn't do a bit.ly, I should have done a bit.ly, but this is a little test you can take, and it lets you know whether you're super intelligent, whether you're super speedy, or super synergistic. Asks you a series of questions. It's kind of fun, so you can leverage that if you'd like to. So on our takeaways, number one, hopefully you've heard over and over again from Bridget, from Tamara, from myself, you must obsess over your customer. It's not about just being customer focused, it's about being customer obsessed. You must really understand what your customer needs today and where they want to go in the future. You really need to really develop a mechanism where you can have that speedy decision-making process when you need it. It was interesting in our study where many companies had 17, 18 layers of approvals to get things done, whereas others had one, maybe two, or none, just to go fast. So what's your mechanism for speed? Third is build that team, that agile team. And Bridget talked about that cognitively diverse team that really drives that innovation. It has been proven that diverse teams innovate faster and they innovate on a greater scale, thinking big. You should leverage technology. So, this is a great conference to learn about artificial intelligence, virtual reality, all the different things that are out there today. Make sure that you're using that technology in order to innovate, to gather insight about your customer, to speed up your decision making like Redfin did with the data side. And then finally, create an ecosystem. And Tamara talked about the different types of ecosystem. There really isn't a company that is successful today all by themselves. Think about it. Everybody has some sort of ecosystem, and that's really what you need to be striving for. So I'm hoping that you took away today some mechanisms to help you innovate, and I know that you'll be able to go back and be that innovator that your CEO or your board or you want yourself to be. So now what I'd like to do is to open it up for questions. Do we have any? We have some questions coming in from Slido. And thank you guys. I know some of you are leaving, but thank you guys very much. Okay, so we've got some questions coming in, so I'm going to read through those questions. So the first one is, as an individual within a very large company, how do I become a catalyst for innovation? More specifically, how do I get that buy-in from my peers and higher-ups? Bridget, I'll let you take that one first.
Sure. So I think you need to find an idea that you really care about and then try to run it into the ground. Go deep and get the data that you need, ask questions. Maybe you need to ask an analyst or you need to ask a manager to help you develop the idea, but don't get so attached to it that if it doesn't work out, you can't move on to the next one. Because I think to really be successful as an individual innovator, you need to have a portfolio of ideas. Your first one might not work. Make sure that you are developing a bunch of ideas in parallel.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think getting someone to help sponsor you, I think is a really good idea. And then just go for it. I will tell you that I had an intern bring me an idea. We put 5 people on that's just growing like wildfire now. It's so very cool. Next question. Who are the greatest innovation sponsors inside of Amazon Web Services and Redfin? And how do they lift innovators up, misfits, and edge thinkers? It's a great question. Do you want to start?
Yeah, so we've divided Redfin into 12 strategic areas at this point. So we got to a size where we had to be really thoughtful about that, and we put people onto those teams, we rotate people onto them, and each team gets, it's usually an executive or someone who's an experienced innovator to really work with them. And so the team gets time to work on their own, but there's always that person there to help develop the idea and to see it in the best light. And I think that has really helped us to scale innovation into the teams.
Yeah, and I think that sponsors are really important, but I also think that methodology that I just walked you through with the press release, the frequently asked questions, and the narrative enables really anyone to innovate and really creates a level playing field. It really does, because then everybody's on the same page. You're not doing a PowerPoint, and some people have the information, some people don't. You're really getting into the merit of the idea versus the person who's presenting the idea. So I think it's really helpful innovation. Okay, so Tamara, we'll go to you next. Children are repeatedly shown to be much more creative than adults. What strategies can we use or employ so we don't lose that original capability that we had to innovate?
Well, what's interesting is that, you know, most of us here were children once, right? So actually, you know, we were unlearned, and so yeah, we were taught to be fearful. We were taught to not make mistakes. A lot of us here may have went to schools where standardized testing was really what you were taught how to do, and so it was this group think of basically getting rid of the creative, artistic side of you. And to innovate means you're going to get really good at screwing up. The most successful people out there have had the most massive screw-ups. So what it is it's embracing your, and being humble, embracing the fact that you are not going to innovate unless you flub up, unless you make a mistake. And so creativity, art, all of that means get messy, get uncomfortable, be willing to trip and fall, get over yourself, get out of your ego, because you can't do that if you want perfection. You're never going to innovate. And so I think being like a child, children don't care if they make a mistake. Children are like water. When they see a rock, they simply figure out a way around it. So we have to be less rigid, become more flexible, and look at the ways in which we have already figured out that we already know, and bust that. Anytime you already know, you're not open for learning. So if your cup is full, how are you going to get anything fresh in there? So I would say just, you know, be willing to make a mistake and put yourself out there. You know, when you're afraid to put yourself out there, that's ego. And if your ego is more important than creating your dream to be a reality, then that's it. But go ahead and make mistakes. I've made so many, I'm actually quite comfortable with it.
The other interesting thing I read in a book by Amy Wilkinson is that children ask an average 900 questions a day, right? I mean, you've all had kids, so you've been there.
I know, I've got some.
Do you know that adults typically, on average, only ask about 50 questions a day? So you learn from your curiosity. So I would also say, in addition to being willing to fail, ask questions, you know, and really drive that out there as well. So I think our time is up. I hope that this was really helpful for you. We are going to stay around if you have more questions. Thank you so much for your time. Go out there and be a great innovator. Thank you. Thanks.